Sirens, Slammers, and Service, a podcast for female first responders by female first responders. My name is Nikki Cloutier, and I will be your host. As a former correctional officer in Alberta for almost 2 decades and the founder of Blue Line Fitness Testing, which provides law enforcement fitness testing and first responder wellness workshops, I started this podcast as a way for female first responders to share the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of their daily work. I want to showcase the unique perspectives, skill sets, and personalities that women bring to a first responder career and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go. Well, this is episode number 1, and I hope that everybody that's tuning in is excited for what's to come with this podcast. I'm really excited to start it. I'm really excited to kick off this new adventure of something that I've never done before, that I'm literally learning as I'm going and trying to figure it out. So it may be a little rough. I will let you know I literally have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just kind of flying by the seat of the pants, which is what I do with the rest of my life. So episode number 1. It's so exciting, you guys. And for this episode, I've decided that I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, about my journey as a female first responder, about my journey through corrections here in Alberta, and just kind of where I came from and where I'm going. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nikki. I am the owner of Blue Line Fitness Testing, and I was a correctional officer here in Alberta for 17 years before I started doing that. I was a correctional officer in a maximum security institution, and since I was little, I kind of had started to think, I really want to go into law enforcement. When I was 7, I saw something about the RCMP, and I was like, you know what? When I grow up, I'm going to be one of those people. And I really honestly geared my whole, childhood and growing up towards becoming law enforcement. So everything I did for school, I kind of had that mentality that I wanted to do that. When I was growing up, I was a lifeguard. I went through all my swimming because I knew you needed to do swimming. I knew you had at the time there was a swimming test. So I did all my swimming. I was a lifeguard. I really liked those leadership roles. I liked kind of teaching and things like that. And as I went through school, I looked ahead and I was like, okay, there's a criminology program. I ended up going to the U of A, and I did my Bachelor of Arts in Criminology there, 4-year program. I did take a year, and I went to Wales on an exchange year. It was one of the best years of my life. If you can, I highly recommend doing that. Go travel abroad. I did school while I was there. Very interesting to see the difference in post-secondary schooling between the countries. It was very interesting, but I'll save that for another podcast. And when I came back, I finished off with my criminology degree. I also played varsity rugby, so I was a member of the Pandas team. Woo woo, go Pandas. And criminology was really, really interesting. The thing I loved about university was the fact that you get to study what you are actually interested in. And I loved every aspect of criminology, the sociology, the psychology, getting into, the criminal law. I loved all that stuff. And when I graduated, during your criminology program, you do 2 practicums. So I did one with the Sherwood Park RCMP, very, very interesting. Great guys out there, loved working with them. And then I did one with the Edmonton Young Offender Center. And again, really interesting youth in corrections, the play on, how you have to deal with parents when you have youth in custody, things like that. Really interesting work. And when I graduated, I was looking, as we all do, right, for a job. I started in group homes. I very quickly knew that was not for me. I am quite an empathetic and compassionate person, despite those of you that might not think so. And I found like I was pouring my heart and soul into these kids, and then they would go home for a home visit, and 3 months of work, they would come back and they were just right back to square one. It was really hard to work with them. It was really hard to pour that much energy and effort and love into those kids, just to know that it really was to no end, and that you probably weren't making the difference that you thought you were. And so I started looking into, what else could I do? I tried to apply to the RCMP right when I got out of university, but unfortunately they said, you're too young, you need to get some work experience. Okay, got it. So I started looking around, and I had at the pool, I had 2 guys that would come and swim every day. They could not swim at all, let me tell you. They used to scare me because they were big dudes, and they would get in at the end, at one end of the pool, and they would kind of kick and splash and flounder their way to the other side of the pool, and then they would get out and they would go to the hot tub, and that was their swim. I used to laugh about it all the time. So one day I started talking to them because they would come in. Sometimes they'd come in at 9 in the morning, sometimes they come in at 4 in the afternoon, sometimes they come in at noon, and I was like, do you have a job? Like, what job do you have that lets you come in at all these different times of day? And they told me they were correctional officers. One was a correctional officer at the Fort Saskatchewan Institution, and one was a correctional officer at the Edmonton Remand Center. And I was like, oh, I was like, are you guys hiring? And they're like, yeah, actually, we are right now. And they're like, what kind of schooling do you have? I said, oh, well, I have a degree in criminology. And they were like, oh, you'll for sure get hired, because at the time, all you needed was high school. So I applied to all three agencies. I got interviews at all three agencies, and Edmonton Remand Center called me first and said, hey, we want you. We want you to work with us. And I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm super excited about this. So super excited, got my uniform, went through the training, the wage orientation training, which was a 5-day training. And then on my first shadow shift, I was working with a senior, very much a senior female staff. And she's actually one of my good friends now. And I was super scared because obviously never been out there. I was 22. And she goes, okay, off you go do a round, which means you got to go out onto the units, go cell to cell to cell, check on the inmates, right? And so I was like, oh God, holy shit. So I took a deep breath and I was like, okay, off I go. So out I go onto the unit, and I walked around and I'm checking each of the cells, and I'm trying not to shit my pants, and I'm going around, and I come back, and one of the inmates asked me a question, and I, okay, talk to the inmate. And then I come back into the unit, and I turned and I looked at her, and I was like, okay. And she looked me dead ass in the face, and she said, you didn't look scared out there at all. And I was like, wow, shit in my pants. And she's like, you know what, kid, you're going to last here. You're going to do well here. And I thought that was amazing, because I thought I was shit in my pants. And to her, I looked confident. I looked like I knew what I was doing. And it obviously didn't come off that I was scared shitless. So that was a good thing. I started on the female units, as most female officers do. And kind of got my feet wet there, learned, how to deal with the inmates, how to deal with, the requests, the day-to-day routines, things like that. Worked with some phenomenal female partners. Like, the one thing about working in law enforcement is you're going to work with some of the best people you will ever meet, and you're going to work with some of the worst people you will ever meet. And you really just got to kind of figure out how you're going to let that play out. But I worked with some really phenomenal female partners. They were super patient. They were great at teaching me. Again, still friends with lots of them, and it was like really fantastic experience. And once I'd had a couple years experience working on the female units, they moved me to the male units. Again, big difference working between females and males. And people used to ask me all the time, like, what's easier to deal with, the females or the males? And I said, it's actually the males. To me, the males are easier to deal with. The reason for that is, if you tell a female no, and all the guys are going to laugh at this, if you tell a female no, she will say, okay, like, no right now, or like, no until 2:00. Like, are you changing your mind? They'll come back like 17 different times in an attempt to get you to say yes, right? Like, they will manipulate. They'll send somebody else up to ask you the question. They'll wait until the next shift to ask you the same question. They'll wait until 10 minutes later to come back and ask you the same question, right? Usually, if you tell a male inmate no, then they get pissed off. They're, fuck this is bullshit. But then they'll usually take it and they go away, right? And then that's it. It's done. Women, they will never let it go. The other thing dealing with women is, if there's an issue on the unit, it's not just that woman and another woman that's involved. It is the whole fucking unit. And then you have to figure out where the loyalties lie today. Who is friends with who today? Who is not friends with who today? Who's going to jump who on the meal line? Who's going to, steal from who, because that belongs to so-and-so, who's friends with so-and-so, who's actually friends with so-and-so. When you have a beef on a male unit, the two guys, they scrap it out, they fight. It's usually a pretty good tilt. Sometimes they're a little pathetic, but usually a pretty good tilt. And then it's over and done with. And they can generally go back on the same unit. Not something that we would do, but they can generally go back on the same unit and be good with each other. And the rest of the unit doesn't get involved, right? So big differences between females and males. And I worked in male units. And when I worked in male units, I had two of the worst partners I've ever had in my entire career. They were both smokers, and they would go, there was 3 of us. And so we'd run 2 units, and there was an officer on each unit and then a floater. And because I was the rookie, I was the floater. But one would go for a cigarette, then I would go and sit and monitor his unit. And literally the second he came back, they would hold the door, the other person would go, and he would go for a smoke, and I'd monitor the other guy's unit. Then he would come back, and the first guy would go for a smoke, and then he'd come back, and the second guy would go for a smoke. I never ever got a break. I never ever got to sit down. I did the work of both units. for almost 2 years, which was really frustrating. But I learned a lot. I really learned a lot because there was no mentoring during those 2 years. That was just me figuring it all out. And I think sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes you have to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet, and sometimes getting thrown into the deep end is super helpful. So that was kind of the learning points for me. And 4 years in, my two of the greatest supervisors again that I ever worked for, our deputy director of operations, they said, Kate, we want you to learn how to do admissions and discharge count. And I said, that math, it's not really my strong suit. Like, I'm really not good at math. And they were like, it's fine, Nikki. You're going to have a calculator. Like, you'll be fine. You just have to add up like 2 and 3 and it'll be fine. And I was like, but I really don't think we should trust me with the entire count for the whole building. I don't know if we should do that. And they were like, you're going down there. And I was like, okay. So down I went. Again, I was trained up by a good friend of mine, another female officer. And we were called the book bitch. That was our name down there because we were in charge of the book. So back in the day, we literally by hand wrote in on these little columns on this piece of paper who was coming in and who was going out, and that's how we tracked count. And so she taught me everything. We also had to strip search and shower and change all the females that came in, and any of the other people that came through the door that needed to be booked in or have warrants checked. We learned how to do all that stuff down there. So it was really, again, a huge learning experience. Again, lots of action in the basement. We would put through over 100 inmates coming down off the units to court every day. So you're bringing down 100 different people that sometimes have separations, sometimes don't. You have to know who can go with who, what tanks are open. It's like playing chess. As soon as one tank would open up, you'd have to slide somebody else in there or move somebody from another tank. So lots of multitasking you need to be able to do. You also had to know how to read those warrants. You had to know that you were sending the right person or that you were moving the right person or that we were placing the right person. So that was really interesting. And again, just lots of really fun times down there. I had an amazing crew that I worked with when I was down in the basement. Probably some of the most fun I've had in corrections, working with that group of people. And then from there, I went up and I learned how to do central control. So central control essentially is when you are opening and closing all the doors, you've got everything on camera, you're working with another partner, and we used to do it where you would drive for an hour. So essentially you were in control of the panel for an hour, and then you would push back, and then you would rest for an hour, or you would kind of do the other side. If a code went off, the person running the panel, they would be taking care of everything. The other person would slide over and kind of do the background work. So again, really great team environment. If you had an awesome partner, it was a great position to be in. Again, learning a lot about, observation, making sure that you're following your staff to make sure that they're safe. Again, code responses, like it came to you. There was elevators in our building, and if you didn't have the elevators ready for the response team, you knew that you were delaying the response of those people to help your fellow brothers and sisters. And so a lot of pressure and a lot of hard work, but it was a really great position that I really enjoyed. And while I was in there, I had said, I think I'm going to try and apply to the RCMP. So I've been, got a little bit of work experience here. I think I'm going to apply to the RCMP. And so I put in my application. I was going through the process, and I actually got the call at work that I'd been deferred. And I was absolutely devastated. I was, in a pretty serious relationship at the time, and I was talking, to my boyfriend, and I was like, yeah, we're going to move. We'll go somewhere in Canada. It's going to be amazing. Super excited, that lifelong dream of being an RCMP, wearing that red surge. And then I got deferred, and I was absolutely devastated. And I could have taken that as, a time to kind of sit and be bitter and pissy and, just awful and let it really kind of destroy my life. Or, I could turn it around and say, okay, so this isn't the opportunity for me right now. What opportunity is there? And let me tell you, I fucking was bitter for a while. I was bitter. I was hurt. I was, I felt like they had deferred me unfairly. I was looking at other people that were getting through, and I was like, you're going to hire that fucking numpty and you're not going to take me? Like, I can't believe it, So I definitely don't, let's not play that I'm like this, saint of like, oh, a door closes, another door opens. I was bitter. I was pissed off. But again, you got to make that choice. You're going to stay bitter, or are you going to move on? And so while I was going through that, my deputy director came into Central, and there was an opening for a supervisor's position within the jail. So I'd only been at the jail for 5 years. And he came in and he said, Miss Thompson, that was my maiden name, Miss Thompson, why is your resume not in for the CO3s competition? And I started laughing, and I was like, well, sir, because I'm like 25 or 27. I have 5 years in. Like, there's no way I'm putting in for the CO3s competition, because at the time you were 40-ish to be a CO3. You'd been in for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years before they looked at you for a CO3's position. You had to have more experience. You had to, like, there was no way. I was like, there's no, like, that's just stupid. And he looked me dead ass in the face and he said, Ms. Thompson, I'm going to ask you again, why is your resume not in for the CO3's competition? And he was a pretty intimidating boss. I mean, he was really good, but he definitely had an air. You definitely called him sir. And I said, well, sir, I guess I could start working on that and have that submitted. And he's like, very well, get on that then, Miss Thompson. And he walked out. And I looked at my partner and I went, what the fuck was that? And she said, well, you better fucking start working on it, because he's going to come back and he'll be pissed if you don't do it. And I said, well, okay, well, I'll put in for it. But we all know that's just shits and giggles. And so I put in for the competition. I got an interview. That was shocking. And I went and did the interview. And then 2 weeks later, they called me and they said, we'd like to offer you a permanent CO3's position. And I just about fell off my fucking chair, because here I was, 27 years of age, a young female, 5 years in, and they were offering me a supervisor's position. And I was super excited about it. I was also fucking petrified, because I really didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't acted, so I hadn't, worked into the position. And I knew that there was going to be some massive blowback on this when my name got posted. But of course, you accept it, because why wouldn't you, right? It's a promotion, it's moving up. And so I accepted it. And they put out the memo and it listed, our names. And immediately somebody wrote on the memo, like, are you fucking kidding me? This bitch, right? Like, just horrible things on the memo about me. And it was surprising how just getting stripes on your shoulders changed how people reacted to me. So people that I truly had believed were my friends, when we were the same level, as soon as I got those stripes on, nothing about me had changed. I literally just put stripes on and came to work the next day. And they treated me completely different. So they wouldn't sit with me in the muster room, or they wouldn't sit with me at lunch, or they didn't want to be seen in my office talking to me. And it was extremely humbling. It was very much an eye-opener for me, again, kind of naive 27-year-old thinking, like, oh, everything's going to be the same. Like, I'm still me. I'm still acting the way I am. I'm still who I am. I'm still doing the job that I do. The only thing that's different is I have stripes on my shoulders. And yeah, that was kind of my first real, I guess, dose of things change when your position changes. And so, learning to do that, learning to navigate the waters of being a supervisor, learning to, try and be a supervisor of sometimes men that were, in their late 50s, late 60s, going on retirement. And again, very traditional men who did not want to listen to what a little girl had to tell them, right? And that was said to me numerous times. Okay, little girl, go back to your office. And having to like stand up and be like, so first of all, I'm not a little girl, and I'm sure as fuck not your little girl. Second of all, I do need you to do this, because we need to do this and it needs to get done. And when it's done, come and see me and we'll talk about it. But it took a lot for me to learn that and learn how to communicate that and learn how to do it without coming across like a massive bitch, but also not coming across as a passover or, somebody that would just lay down and be intimidated by these guys. And so that again, big learning curve. At the same time as I was going through all that, our tactical team had an opening. And again, if you know me, I'm a little bit of a person that's going to push the boundaries and I'm going to try for things. And they had one female on the team at the time. And I kind of looked and I thought, I want to do this. I had a lot of friends that were on the team. And I was like, this is like the be all and end all. Like when you get into, law enforcement career, like that's sometimes, what you're looking at. Not everybody, but a lot of people look at that and they go, I want to be that. I want to be that. That's it. So I was working on my fitness and I was training hard and I was, trying to respond to codes and go with the guys and take an active role, if there was, a physical altercation code rather than a medical code. And And so I put in for the team, and the coordinator at the time was my supervisor. And so I'd asked him a couple questions, and I just said, like, what do you think? And he's like, well, like you're little. I'm only 5 feet. You're little, but you're strong, and we think you could probably do it. Like, let's see how you do in the interview. So I put in for the interview, did the interview, thought I did well. And then it goes to the team, and the team have a discussion, and they talk about, is this person that's coming on the team, are they going to fit the dynamic? Is there any underlying issues with this person that's going to cause trust issues amongst the team? Is there issues that, are going to come up where, this person has excessive use of force or isn't forceful enough? Is this person going to flee when the shit hits the fan? And so they talk, and they made their decision. And the first time I applied, they said no. And I was like, again, devastated. Like, oh, I thought for sure I could do it. I thought for sure I could be part of this team. But okay, yeah, you're right. I get it. And I talked to a couple of the boys on the team, and they said, you were super close, but there was other people ahead of you. And I was like, okay, that's fair. That's fair. It's not my time. I get it. And so the next the next application came up a couple months later, and I was kind of questioning, do I even put in for this? Like, am I wasting my time here as a girl? Like what's the chance? What's the chances? And I said, fuck it, put in, right? Because you never know. You never fucking know until you put in. And so I put in and went through the process again, worked even harder on my fitness, and I got selected. I got selected into our A squad, which essentially you have to work from the A squad into the full squad. And I was so excited, and I learned again so much when I was training with that team. How to enter a unit safely, baton work, tactical drill. Like, it was amazing. It was a great experience. I was on the team for almost 3 years, and during that time we had 2 riots. We had a massive entire building search we had to do because we had thought a firearm was in the building. And again, just an amazing experience working with fantastic people. And again, we'll probably talk more about the riot. We'll talk about some funny stories that come up from that in a different episode. But it was a phenomenal experience, and I was just super lucky to be able to be part of that team. And the only reason that I quit was that I got pregnant with my first daughter, and I actually was training with the team until I was about 4 months pregnant. I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to quit, because that's me. And so it got to a point where I couldn't get my pants on anymore. I couldn't do my pants up. And one of the guys looked over at me as we were kind of getting ready to go, and he, you could tell he thought, oh, fuck, Nikki's getting fat, right? But he wasn't going to say anything. And so I kind of said, I did the practice, and it was a little rough, and I thought, yeah, okay, it's time. I can't be, smashing and bashing and rolling around 4 months pregnant. So I let the team know, and they were so mad. They were so mad that I waited that long to tell them. They're like, you've been out here for 4 months. You could hurt your baby. And I was like, it's all good, boys. I would have stopped if I knew I was hurting it, right? So I ended up having to resign from the team. But again, probably 3 of the best years of my life in corrections on that team. And then, we carry on with our careers, and an opportunity arose to go to our head office because we were talking about building a brand new jail. So the jail in downtown Edmonton, we had massively outgrown it. It was built in 1979. It was built to house 300 some inmates, and at the time we had 800 in it. Not enough space, not enough outdoor space, not enough cells and bunks, especially with all the separations that we were getting, the gangs that were starting to come out. A lot of the issues we were having with overcrowding and, again, access to amenities. And so a new jail was being designed and talked about and budgeted. And so they were looking for staff to come over to the head office to basically help with that. And I thought, at this point, I had about 7 years in. And we kind of say in law enforcement, there's these waves and these ebbs and flows of your career. And the first 2 years or so is still exciting. You still think this is awesome. You still think this is the greatest career ever. You get to do really cool things and fun things, and you're like, this is amazing. And then you hit about kind of 2 years, and it starts to lose its luster. And it's the same for any job, really. It loses its luster. You start to get frustrated. You start to see some of the politics, start to see some of the nepotism, things like that. But again, if you're working with really good people, you can kind of get over that. You do your own thing. You come in, you have your good partner, you do your shift, you get home, you're happy, right? You're making money, you're working overtime, you're doing your thing. Then you kind of hit about that 7-year flow. And at 7 years, most people hit a wall. So you're pissed off, you're bitter, you just have seen shitty humans over and over and over and over again. You've seen horrible things happen that you don't normally see anywhere else, in any other career. You've seen brutal politics. You've seen brutal favoritism and nepotism. You've been, again, probably the victim of harassment or bullying or something along the lines of, workplace issues. And you've maybe have been passed over for promotion. Maybe you've been passed over for an opportunity that you really felt you truly should get. Maybe didn't get to go on a training that you wanted to go on, right? And people kind of hit that 7 year wall, and they get really bitter and twisted. And again, that's a turning point, right? Some people leave their career at that state. They go elsewhere. They look for other law enforcement careers, or they just leave entirely. Some people just look for a different position within the same career. Some people just look for a different opportunity. And that's kind of where I hit. I still wanted to be in corrections. I still thought that this was awesome. My RCMP, I'd kind of revisited going to the RCMP, but now that I was a supervisor, I thought, I would have to move. I'd gotten married, obviously gotten pregnant. I'd have to move, and I've had to take my whole family and go somewhere. And that's not really in our cards right now. So I think I'm just going to stick here, and I'm going to try this opportunity. So I applied for it. And ended up getting the job at our head office and went over there for 2 years and basically worked on all of the planning and preparation for the jail. So deciding, how the jail would look, what the designs would look like, what we would put in the cells, what the detention grade furniture would look like, how we would, what gear we would get, what fire gear would we get, what tactical gear would we get, what security equipment would we get. And obviously it wasn't just me, there was a team of us working on this stuff, but very, very cool opportunity. And not only that, getting to work in head office. I got to work Monday to Friday, 8:15 to 4:30. Like that was huge after 7 years of, shift work. It was a nice break, and I got to go over and, see what office work was like. Let me tell you, office work ain't all it's cracked up to be also. So as much as fun as it was, my partner and I got yelled at because we were laughing about something in our offices and we were being too loud. And I was just like, I don't think I've ever been yelled at the jail for being too loud. Like usually you're just blending in with the noise, right? So there was some adjustments that had to go on over there. But again, a really amazing experience to get over there and be able to, shape how the new jail would look. And then while I was there, I also was in charge of training, building the training, and then training all of the new officers that we would be bringing over. When we moved from the downtown Edmonton Remand Center to the new Remand Center, we went from a closed supervision model, which meant we were in bubbles. Our offices were inside a bubble, and then you would go out of the bubble onto the unit, and you would go do your round, and then you would come back into your bubble. And then moving to open concept supervision, which is where your desk is basically out in the open. So an inmate can literally come right up to your desk and kind of talk to you at any point in time. And that was a really scary transition for a lot of staff. As a lot of our senior staff who had only ever worked in a bubble situation, had a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety around that. The fact that inmates could just basically come up at any point in time. And so part of my job was I got sent to Colorado for 2 weeks to become a direct supervision training instructor. That was, again, a great experience. Met correctional officers from all over the United States that were all, their jails were going through the exact same thing. They were moving from closed supervision to open supervision, kind of hearing what is different down there compared to what is different in Canada. And then, bringing that knowledge back and training. We trained over 800 staff to be able to get them through into the jail. And it was everything on direct supervision to how to, what new radio systems we were using, what new equipment we would be using, the new layout of the buildings, the new how a code would be called, how would we respond, if a fire happened, how would we evacuate the inmates, and just 2 really intensive years of training. And it was a great experience. I really fully enjoyed that and thought that that was one of the best things that I did. It was also one of the hardest things I've ever done in corrections, to have to stand up in front of your peers and basically try and teach them a new way of corrections and to be met with open hostility, open hatred, basically, calling me a liar, telling me I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, telling me I was going to get them killed, that I was going to absolutely get them killed and they wouldn't be able to go home to their families because of me, because I was putting them at risk by putting them on the unit in an open concept situation, having week after week after week to have to read evaluations where people just shit on me as an instructor and basically said, Nikki thinks she knows everything and she's a fucking bitch, would come in on an evaluation, right? And so, yeah, that wears on you. That wears on you when really all you're trying to do is your best and you're just trying to teach these people what they need to know to be able to go out onto the units and do what they need to do. And also not knowing any of the definites yourself. The jail wasn't open. We didn't have inmates. What I was teaching was theoretical and hoping based on what I was hearing from our higher ups, which as you all know is sometimes isn't the greatest information or isn't the most accurate. And again, they don't know sometimes. And having to share that information and hoping that what they were promising was actually going to come true. But yeah, it was really, really, really fucking hard. And I went through a point there too where I was like, fuck this job and fuck these guys. This is not worth the stress. This is not worth the energy and effort I'm pouring into this. Again, people that I truly had believed were my friends that were talking shit and saying awful things about me. And they would come to the training and then they would go back and they would just talk shit about me. And I would hear it. And and it just, again, it wears on you. It grates on you. And you think to yourself, like, why the fuck am I doing this? Right. But again, you persevere. And that was one thing, like moving through my career. My best friend had sent me a birthday card one year and it's a picture of a little girl, and looks like she's pushing this boulder up this mountain. And it's really just the way the rock is sitting. It looks like she's pushing it, but she's not really pushing it. And it hit me so deep because I was like, this is fucking me every day. This is how I feel every day. I feel like I'm pushing this rock up this mountain and I'm fighting against all of these forces that are just trying to take me down. No matter where I turn, no matter what I do, this is how I feel. And so, again, you kind of hit that 14-year, kind of issues where you're starting to get into 10 to 14 years of service. And again, that bitterness comes, that hatred comes for your job. You're not working with good people, or what you're doing isn't lighting you on fire. And again, so you push through, because my motto always was, fuck this. I'm stronger than that. I'm not going to let these guys beat me down. Like, fuck it. I'm step up. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Right. So you put a brave face on and you go back to work. And so then we opened the jail. We opened the jail in 2013. And promptly within opening the jail, within about 2 weeks, all the staff went on strike. And during the time period of training, everybody had actually been promoted into a manager's role. And again, that caused a whole fuckload of issues, because who do I think I am getting a manager's job when I haven't been working frontline at the jail? I've been, working this gravy position over at head office, right, is what everybody thought. Meanwhile, I've been in the trenches trying to deal with everybody that hates me, trying to train all these people that hated what we were doing. But yeah, totally gravy train, guys. Yeah, it's totally a gravy train. And so, but I'd gotten moved into a management role. And so when we opened the jail, I was in a assistant manager's position. And as managers, we are no longer within the union, so therefore no longer able to go on strike. The staff walked out. It was actually my shift that we were supposed to be relieved. I think it was even day 6. We were supposed to be relieved by the afternoon shift, and afternoon shift refused to come on duty. And it was related to a whole bunch of different issues, but specifically one staff member. So my staff, we had to go around and basically say, like, are you willing to stay? If you're willing to stay, we'd really appreciate it, because we need to cover these units. But by 7:00 that night, everybody had walked out, and all that was left was the 5-person management team and our directors from upstairs. And a lot of those guys had never worked a unit at the new jail. They didn't know the systems. They didn't get trained on them. So it fell to myself and 4 other staff members to basically run a jail that normally 150 staff would run. And then the nurses walked out. And so we were left with no medical care for, at the time, I think we had 1,200 inmates, something like that. And no medical care, no diabetes medication, no heart medication, no epileptic medication, nothing. And so the healthcare manager had tried to stay, but obviously one person trying to do it all. And so we immediately began having medical codes after codes after codes. Inmates were locked down. They were unhappy about being locked down. So there were issues there. We were trying to respond across the jail with, minimal staff. And they brought in other staff from other areas, but again, not familiar with our jail. Eventually, they brought in the RCMP, and then having to train the RCMP on how to run the units. So it was 5 days. I slept, I think, maybe 5 hours in 5 days. And I was actually pregnant with my second daughter that nobody knew about. And absolutely exhausted. And at the end of those 5 days, the union was basically ordered to return back to work. The staff were ordered back in. And we, as management, were forced to stand at the front of the muster room and basically allow any insults that the staff wanted to hurl at us to be thrown at us. So you have a line of managers who have just worked probably 100 hours in 5 days, if not more. And you now have to stand up there and basically the staff can say, you put us at risk. You did this, you did that. When really it wasn't any of us. We were all trying to figure it out together. And we were all trying to, keep everybody safe all together. And so that, again, probably one of the hardest moments of my life was to stand up there in front of 150 staff and basically just be shit on and be told, that I'm a piece of shit and I'm a piece of garbage and it's my specific fault because I was one of the trainers and I didn't train them on that stuff, even though every single one of them had gotten the training manual that had shown them exactly what they were complaining about, right? So super frustrating, super hard. And I went home and I cried and cried and cried for about 2 days after that. And I slept and I was exhausted. And again, I thought to myself, what the fuck am I doing in this job? I went on mat leave with my daughter, my second daughter, about 4 or 5 months after that. And that entire year I spent looking for a new job. I was like, there is no fucking way I'm going back to that jail. I absolutely hate that place. I hope it fucking burns to the ground with everybody in it. And, looking for jobs, looking for new jobs, looking for something else, which is hard when you've got, then at that point I had 11 years in and I was like, wow, here I am, trying to get out. What else can I do? I have a degree in criminology. I have, 11 years of law enforcement experience. That you can't really move from this into an office environment. We don't really fit in that well, right? So what am I going to do? And so at the end of my mat leave, I ended up going back to the jail and I thought to myself, okay, well, buckle up, baby, because this is what we have to do. We've got to go back. We got to go deal with this fucking shit now. And luckily, when I went back, there had been quite a few changes in the year that I was gone. Things had settled, obviously, because we had, been open for a year and a bit. Routines were better set. A lot of the negative staff had retired or had left because they didn't want to be part of open concept. We'd hired a lot of new staff, which comes with its own challenges. Again, new staff means a lot of training, but it also means that we had an opportunity to, kind of set a culture that we wanted and the standards that we wanted. Again, does that always hold? Not necessarily, but it's a start. And I actually got a chance to work with a phenomenal team again. And that was the key part of that. I was working with an amazing set of partners. The five of us were like just this dream team. We loved working with each other. We took care of each other. We had each other's backs. No matter what, if somebody was having a shit day, another person could step up and help you out. And that was huge. That was one of the biggest things that I needed at the time to kind of renew my passion and my love for my job. I got to step into more of a leadership role on the shift. I was doing some more training. I was doing some more work with people. I took over our field training officer program and I was working with that, doing some more security-based work and I was loving it. I absolutely loved kind of those 2 years. But along the way, we had also promoted some pretty toxic people into higher management. And it was a glass ceiling. It was a boys club. And those that say it wasn't a boys club are full of fucking shit. And I know that there'll be people listening to this podcast who will protest and say, oh, Nikki, no, it wasn't like that. And I will tell you right now, yes, it fucking was. It was a boys club. If you were friends with the specific person, then you got promoted. If you were his buddy or you played hockey or your kids played hockey, cocky with his kids or you did those things, then you were promoted. If you didn't, if you spoke out, if you weren't a puppet, if you weren't a yes man, then you didn't get promoted. And so, of course, for those of you that know me, know that I'm not a puppet and know that I do speak out and know that I will not hold for what I feel is injustice or bullshit. And so despite as hard as I tried, moving up was not a thing. It wasn't happening. And it was really frustrating. I was targeted by a lot of people to come down. I had notes pushed underneath the director's door saying, that I had done certain things that I hadn't done, and I had to then defend myself. And in morning meetings, I would be told, "You're too emotional, Nikki. You're just too emotional. You need to just sit there and be quiet." But knowing that what I was bringing forward was valid concerns from the front lines. Our staff were saying, "We can't do this. We can't execute this policy. We can't have this inmate here." And then when I would bring it up, being told, "You know what, Nikki," and like a little pat on the head, or a pat on the shoulder. "Thanks so much for trying, but just sit down and be quiet, please." So again, super frustrating, right? Super condescending and humiliating at times. And I got really, really frustrated. And again, I kind of had now hit that 14-ish, 15-ish years in and was like, what the fuck is going on here? I was working really long hours. I was working more night shifts. At the time, I had 2 kids, and then got pregnant with my 3rd girl. She was a little bit of a surprise. So, 3 young kids now that I was, responsible for, trying to stay up for in the mornings when I got home from night shift so I could spend time with them. And just, I was like, this is craziness. I don't have an opportunity to move up here. Again, I'm going to start looking for other opportunities. And so there was a posting down at Red Deer Remand Center for a deputy director, so a position above where I was at. And I thought to myself, well, I'm already going in an hour early and I'm staying an hour late every shift to do all the paperwork and all the work that goes with being at the busiest and biggest jail in Canada. And I don't get paid for that. So what's the difference with me driving an hour and a bit before and after each shift? And I'll get paid more because I'll be the deputy director. And it's a smaller jail. So I'll be able to execute some of these programs that I really want to do and some of these things I want to do for our staff. I should be able to do those things because it's a smaller jail. We'll have a little bit more time, and there's the potential. The director there is looking to retire in the next year or 2. Maybe there's an opportunity to move even higher and be able to be the director of Red Deer Remand Center. And so I took the leap and I applied and I got the job, and I was shocked but also excited because it was a new adventure. It was leaving everything that I'd ever known. I'd only ever been at Edmonton Remand Center besides my little stint at head office. Those were my people, that pace, that level of work, that level of extreme events that happen there. Like, if it's going to fucking happen and it's bad, it's going to happen at the Edmonton Remand Center. That's just the way it is. It's always like that. It's the busiest, it's the baddest, it's the fucking most gnarliest. The shit that goes on in there is crazy, right? And so I thought, well, if I can deal with that, I can deal with anything Red Deer has to show me. And so in 2018, I took a job down in Red Deer. And I started commuting back and forth every day, and it was a long haul, but I kept thinking to myself, I'm doing this because I'm going to further my career. I'm going to further, my family. Potentially we can move down here. My husband had a business, that we were like, well, maybe we can sell it and we can move down there, and we'll play it by ear. And it started out awesome down there. I went from the whale of the jail to the minnow of the jail. Edmonton Remand Center has about 1,700 inmates. Capacity is 1,900. Red Deer has like 100 inmates. Edmonton Remand Center has 150 staff per shift. Red Deer has 12. So it's very, very different. Edmonton has on-call support basically 24/7. We have records administration. We have healthcare on 24/7. In Red Deer, you have it for maybe 16 hours if you're lucky. Records you have for 8 hours, right? So a lot of the work that I used to have to do at the old remand, I had to relearn it because there is no support there. There was no records person you could go to get, hey, what do you think about this? To bounce the idea off about a warrant or something like that. You had to figure it out on your own. And so relearning all of that, relearning how staff that don't ever have codes, they have an emergency incident every month, maybe, if that, how to retrain them how to do that every single month because they forget, versus at ERC we had 8-9 codes a day. easily, right? So doing that, training on that, dealing with, Edmonton Remand Center, they would say it was like a high school, lots of gossip, lots of drama, lots of, issues. Well, if ERC was a high school, Red Deer was a junior high school. Petty, more silliness, more baby issues that you just thought, you guys are fucking adults. I can't believe that we're dealing with this. And the commute was really killing me, like doing 3 hours of driving every single day on top of 8, 9 hour shifts. Getting home, the rest of my life didn't stop. I was still teaching yoga. I was still coaching rugby. I was still playing rugby. I was still, the president of my rugby club. I was still volunteering. I was still doing all the things that keep me sane, right, outside of work. And on top of that, I was driving to Red Deer and back every single day. And I was just burnt. I was so burnt out. I didn't even realize how burnt out I was. I didn't realize how mentally unwell I was. I was making really poor decisions in my life. I was on a roller coaster of emotions every day. I was, manic. I was depressive. I was out of control and didn't really truly realize it until I hit a wall in the summer of 2019, and I basically came screeching to a halt. And there was some other issues that were going on, and it really just kind of brought it all to the surface. And I thought to myself, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what am I actually fucking doing here? Like, I have 17 years in this career. I have 18 more to go in order to retire with a full pension. 18 more. And I'm this burnt out and I'm this tired and I'm this mentally unwell after 17 years. I'm not going to make fucking 18. I'm going to end up dead. I'm going to end up the CO that retires and dies within 3 months of retiring. Or I'm going to have a heart attack before I even fucking retire. I'm not even going to be able to enjoy the retirement that I'm working for. My kids are getting the worst version of their mom. They're getting the mom that screams at them every single time they ask a question because she's so fucking tired and she's so burnt out that she just can't deal with it anymore. They're getting the mom that has poured her energy and her drive into her 8 hours of work, 9 hours of work, and into the staff that she works with. And when she comes home, she's tapped. There's nothing left for the people that actually matter, for her babies, for the people that love her unconditionally and that just want to give her a hug and get a hug back. And so I basically said, this is the end. I can't do this anymore. I got to the point where I was actually suicidal. I was to the point of, it wasn't that I wanted to die, and I've talked about this before, and we'll probably get into it again in a little bit more detail in another episode, but it wasn't that I wanted to die, it's that I was so fucking tired, I just wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. And to hit that point of, what am I doing? If this is how I feel and this is how I am, like, why am I killing myself for this job that doesn't give a fuck about me? And so I made the really, really hard decision to pull the pin. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it for about a month. And then one night I woke up in the middle of the night and I just had this revelation of like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm quitting. And I rolled over and I looked at my husband. I was like, I'm quitting. And he was like, okay. He goes, I think that's probably what's best for you. And I was like, I think it is too. And I woke up the next day and I wrote my resignation letter. I drove down to Red Deer. I handed it into our boss and I walked away from 17 years in corrections. And again, one of the hardest things I've ever done because I'd been wearing a uniform for 17 years. That had been my identity for 17 years. When people ask what I did, I'm a correctional officer. Oh my God, that's so cool, wicked. Like I bet you have some wicked stories, right? There's a identity that goes with that, right? You are a different person when you're an officer versus being a civilian. And it was a tough transition. And again, we'll probably get into it more in another episode. It was a tough transition. It was tough to do. It was hard to do. I took a long time to heal. I slept almost like a whole month away, just trying to let my physical body heal from the burnout and from the work, the overwork and the overstimulation that I'd put myself through. And then, as I kind of came out of that fog and started to heal, I started to look around and figure out like, so now what? Now what do I do? Because all I've ever known is law enforcement. All I've ever known is being in uniform, corrections, dealing with cons, warrants, paperwork, things like that. What do I do? And I'd been kind of bouncing the idea around as a fitness instructor. And when I was a manager in Red Deer, we couldn't get any staff because nobody could run the fitness tests. They only offered it in a few places and only offered it once or twice a month. And I thought, this is fucking stupid. Like, we need these staff now. I can't have my staff working 16 hours and then ask them to work another 8 because there's literally nobody else that can work. Like, how can we not get enough staff? And so I started bouncing the idea around and kind of thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And then, kind of did a little bit more research into what would it take for me to become a certified fitness tester for the corrections test, for the pair test that we use for our sheriffs and our bylaw officers and our RCMP officers. What would it take? And so I dug into a little bit more, and the idea bloomed. And one day I turned to my husband, who, God bless his soul, just flies with me and just nods his head yes and goes, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I said, babe, I'm going to start a business. And he looked at me, he said, you don't know anything about starting a business. You don't know anything about business. And I was like, I know, but I'll figure it out. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to do law enforcement fitness testing. I'm going to call it Blue Line Fitness Testing. And he was like, all right, babe, you do you. And that is how Blue Line Fitness Testing was founded. I just took it and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And there's no way, I can't fail. There's no way to fail. I have to do this. I'm going to do this. And I started. And Blue Line Fitness was born from basically me saying, I'm going to start this business and I'm going to run with it and I'm going to make it work. And I'm going to run fitness testing for first responders, and I'm going to do wellness workshops for first responders, because I saw how burnt out I was. And I didn't even realize I was that burnt out. I saw how my personality had changed. I saw how I was a different person after years of working in law enforcement. And I saw my law enforcement friends were the same way, and they didn't realize it. And I knew that I needed to do something to support all of the people that work in law enforcement right now who don't see the changes, who don't feel them, because you're just getting up every day and you're going to work day to day to day. And we started and we kicked it off, and immediately we got shut down by COVID. And it was a challenging, last 2 years have been challenging. We've been open since essentially October of 2019. Shut down for COVID for quite a few months over those 2 years, and have had tons of programs that we wanted to launch that we got shut down for because we were considered a gym. But I am so proud to say that we have built and built and built, and now I have this phenomenal team of people that work with me. We've got trainers, we have yoga instructors, we have facilitators for our workshops. We have a dedicated facility that I've been able to keep open, the doors open for 2 years during the pandemic. We've offered the fitness testing to over 1,000 people in these 2 years. And it's amazing. I got to, and I have been able to reignite my passion for people, my passion for coaching and teaching and leading and motivating people. And every day, I just cannot believe that this is my job. I cannot believe that I have the luck and the blessings to be able to do this as a job, because I love absolutely every single minute of it. It is amazing. Is it fucking hard work? Oh my God, is it ever? Is it frustrating at times when people don't listen or people don't understand? Oh my God, yes. Is there little quirks and things that drive me bananas sometimes and I just have to like scream into a pillow? Yes. But is it 1,000 times better than where I was in the summer of 2019? Absolutely, 1,000%. Yes. And then on top of all of that, being able to start this podcast, being able to do what I love, talk to the people I love, get their stories out, be able to reach out and network and integrate with other badass females who I just think are absolutely amazing and who live these full and rich lives doing things to serve their communities and serve the people that they love and serve the people that they live with. Again, how did I get so lucky? How did I get so lucky to be able to do this? And so that, my friends, is my story. And like I said throughout, I'm sure there'll be more episodes where we kind of dive into different parts of it. But That's me. That's who I am. That's what I do. That's why I'm here. And I cannot wait. Like I said, I cannot wait for you guys to get the opportunity to hear from all of these amazing women. A lot of them are my friends that I've met through different facets of my life. A lot of them are people that I've had the fortune of working with, or working for, or have worked for me. And they bring such a breadth of knowledge and skills. And I hope that throughout this podcast, you're inspired by these women and you're motivated by these women. If you're looking at a career in law enforcement or as a career as a first responder and you want information, these women are all willing and able for you to be able to reach out to them, to talk to them, to pick their brains about the different things, and you will be madly inspired by them because they are phenomenal. They're just amazing women. So, with that, my friends, it's time to bid you adieu and say, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Enjoy it. Be grateful for what you have. And if you're stuck in a position where you feel like you can't get out, if you're stuck in a position where you feel like you're pushing that rock up the wall or up the mountain and you're just not getting anywhere, maybe just reevaluate what you're doing and why you're doing it. And maybe, just maybe, take that leap into something that scares the ever living shit out of you, because the other side could be absolutely brilliant and amazing. I love you guys. Have a good one. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening, tuning in, and sharing your time and energy with us. Make sure you check out our next episode starring another badass female first responder on Apple, Spotify, or TuneIn. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Blue Line Fitness Testing. Stay safe and keep your head on a swivel.